What is that, Eric?
It's Doge.
You're starting to see how fat and bloated our government was.
Yeah,
and it kind of makes you mad where all your tax money's going.
We spend all these trillions of dollars, and I've always wondered, where the hell's it all going? If you're doing it right, you're going to have hard conversations that you may not want to have.
Welcome to Chasing Millions. Let's talk about a topic you're seeing all over the news today. What is that, Eric?
It's Doge, Department of Government Efficiency.
What does that mean? Well, you're trying to become more efficient and less bloated and less flat. So reading over all these and seeing all these data points on all these different social media and then being transparent, that's another one of our topics today because we're going to have a few topics in this area, is you're starting to see how fat and bloated our government was.
Yeah,
and it kind of makes you mad where all your tax money's going.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys are like me that are listening, but you're like, where in the world? We spend all these trillions of dollars, and I've always wondered, where the hell's it all going, right? We all kind of had the speculation, at least I feel like we all had the speculation that people are getting kickbacks and all kinds of crap going on, and now it's coming to light, right?
Yep. And
so we wanted to do a kind of a special podcast here to talk about, how we can implement the processes that Doge is doing in our business to help you guys. This is what we've done. We were doing it already before the Doge was created. So we wanted to kind of go over that and kind of tie those two together, because what Elon's doing isn't rocket science, guys. I mean, he's just doing some basic efficiency models that should have been done a long time ago for transparency.
Exactly. Let's talk about 5 internal Doge things that you can implement in your business that could drastically change the bottom line. Let's talk about number 1, data. Yep. The first thing you're continuing to see is Elon went out and got the smartest, brightest souls that he could put himself around in technology, and he extracted the data.
That's right.
So Trump and his team, along with Elon, they were willing and able to make calculated decisions because they were extracting good data.
Yep. And
a lot of this was not, when you're a small business like us, it's hard. It's very, very tough. We're dealing with hundreds of thousands and millions. These guys are dealing with billions and trillions.
Yeah. Imagine the data sets that they're going through.
You start seeing these numbers.
That's why AI is so important.
And they're doing it with AI.
Yeah, for sure.
So what Erik has done a very good job on is, my team, because I handle the finances and accounting, my team has continued to improve our data. We handed over the data to Erik, and I gave him initiative to go in there and cut cost, and he's taken that data and highlighted a few points.
Yep. And which brings us on to our next section, which is contracts. And why that's relevant to what he's saying is that he gave me the data, and then we look at the data and go, oh shit, there's discrepancies, right? You dive into the specifics, right? And I can't stress enough, it's really easy when you're growing in a business like we are to forget about this finite little details, because if you're doing well and you're making money and you get complacent and you're only looking at the up and you're not looking down into the nitty gritty. So he gave me the information, I got down to the nitty gritty, and what we figured out is, and I know this is going to help you guys, is first and foremost, look at your contracts and be very, very careful of what you sign, because it could come back and bite you.
Especially early on in your entrepreneurship career, you're starting to sign. I'll give you an example. We just figured out we have a 5-year contract on uniforms that we no longer need.
Yep. And what I was specifically able to do is dive into the contract, find ways I couldn't get out of it. But what I could do was I could minimize that spend down to, it went from like $400 a week. I minimized my spend down to about $15 a week until the contract runs out.
And what are some contracts you found?
Samsara. So we basically, all of our trucks that run around the road, we use Samsara for GPS and some other funny functions, but I'm not going to get into all that. But that was on a contract, right? So we had to go in there, and what was happening is that some of these Samsara modulars that they had in there were getting lost, getting broken, things like that. And my team was not going back in there and canceling them or getting them replaced. So now we've got I can't remember the numbers, but let's just say for hypothetical, there was 50 of them when we started, and now only 30 of them are in working order and working, and I was paying on all 50 of them.
Well, another one you found was uniforms, and another one was AT&T. How much did we cut AT&T alone?
It was $2,000 some odd a month.
A month.
So it's the finite details. Is that what we figured out is that, we used a lot of iPads. We've always stressed to everybody that watches our stuff is that we try to be, ahead of the times, and everybody that they work on iPads. Well, those iPads, like any other thing that people don't give a crap about, is they get left on the back of a truck or they get left on the ground and rolled over. Well, what happens is they have these little cards in there, and you're supposed to go back in and either reuse the cards or shut the cards down. Well, we would just throw the cards in the trash, right? And then replace them with brand new ones that are now active. Well, you do that for a couple of 2 or 3 years, and next thing you know, I'm overpaying $2,000 a month in AT&T that we're using something that's not actually being utilized. So it's ridiculous things, right? That you can miss. Anybody can miss. I was missing them, right? But it is very, very important to, back to what you're saying, looking at the data and diving into these contracts and figuring out what it is that you're spending your money on. And sometimes it's not just contracts. It could be as simple as, you're overeating too much in entertainment, or, there's a million other reasons and other things that we looked at. But diving down into the nitty gritty and looking at your overspend.
And just be careful, folks. This is a mistake that you guys will make. Be careful. Everybody wants term contracts on all types of things, right? Uniforms, AT&T. We just went down a few of the very many lists of things that we signed ourselves up for at the very beginning. Be careful what you sign. You will be held liable, and you do have an obligation, and they will be upheld, and they do cost money to get out of. So let's talk about another one. Let's talk about Erik has the data. He went in there and noticed some cuts immediately he could make. He realized that those cuts had contracts with them. Same thing you're hearing online. All these governments had all these contracts with certain people, some of which you can get out of, and some you have just ride it out, right? Yeah. Or negotiate yourself out of.
Yep.
So another thing that we need to talk about is being transparent, right? It's very, very difficult. I know a lot of you small business owners, you guys have everything so tight and you don't want your team to know anything. But it's very imperative that you are transparent and open and honest with the people that you're hiring, and you're paying a lot of money to make decisions on your behalf, and you give them the right data and you open up to them. Because if you don't, they will never be able to execute what the Doge program's all about, and that's cutting costs and building your bottom line.
Yeah, you got to essentially at some point trust. You got to hire the right people, which is difficult. But once you hire them and you know that they have the capabilities, you got to trust them to do their job and then hold them accountable on that job.
100%. Yeah. So let's go kind of rewind here. You have the data, you review the data, you realize some of that stuff that you want to cut comes with contracts. Okay. You're open up to your team. You task them. You say, hey, look, I am trying to put another XYZ to the bottom line. They already know where to save. They already know where it's fat, right? And then you're allowing them to do it. The last thing you want to do, and not the last, but second to last, is you want to what? Leverage your spend. Erik's done a great job on this. I cannot compliment him enough. He's built a big company. He has more trucks on the road. He has more tires on the road. He has more uniforms and hats and computers and IT and all this stuff. And what are you doing?
Leveraging my vendors, man. And I'll give you a perfect example. And sometimes you wonder if it was on purpose or not when you run into some of these things, but I give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And that's just me. That's my own management style. But I was able to save upwards of $125 some odd thousand to the bottom line this year, just in one leverage. And we did many, many leverages, right? So leveraging your vendors, and you can do this at a higher level the bigger you get. So what you don't want to forget, and this is where I think I went somewhat wrong, is as I began to get bigger, you don't really take into consideration your spend with people and how important it is for them to get that spend coming in every year.
Because we need it too.
Because we need it too in different aspects, right? So you have to take into consideration that if you're spending $100,000 with O'Reilly's, it's going to be impactful at that little regional O'Reilly's if they lose your business. So you can go to them and say, hey, I'm spending X amount of dollars with you. What are you going to do to save me money? And to give you a perfect example, O'Reilly's was actually one of them that I used too, but there's also funny things that you can do, like charge accounts that come with benefits and rebate systems that you need to be taking advantage of if you're not now. So Lowe's has them, Home Depot, O'Reilly's, a lot more vendors than you really realize. A lot more vendors than you realize have rebate systems. So make sure you're utilizing rebate systems, and it'll be right back to your bottom line. So you might as well, right? You're stupid if you're not. So
Here's
those are just
another
a
one.
couple
Here's
little
another idea.
tidbits.
When you create a successful business, right? It could be 100,000 or it could be hundreds of millions, if not billions, right? And it's very easy to get bullied. I call it bullied, but it's pushed in the direction you really is not probably beneficial to you at the very beginning because you're trying to get that 10 or 15% discount, right? Uniforms. But when you're the size of Erik, you can say, and you have the right data, and you driven down into that, and you realize that you've done your due diligence and you can go get fuel somewhere else cheaper, or you can get those uniforms somewhere else cheaper. And somebody sees the amount of money you're spending in that category, you don't have to sign that contract most of the time. You can say, hey, look, I know you want me to sign a 5-year contract, but I'm spending $400,000. I'm spending $1 million in this category. I'm not signing a contract. Mm-hmm. And they're going to have to make that decision if they're going to say no because they don't want a contract or not.
Yeah, and the last piece to kind of add to that I thought was interesting is the larger you get, the less you can be required for personal guarantees.
Well, that's another thing.
Yeah, so
we don't sign personal guarantees anymore, not because we don't want to pay somebody back, right? But the amount of personal guarantees you have floating out there over a period of time is crazy. And it's very, very tough to keep track of. And banks want to know about them, right?
Yeah.
So leverage your spend. How do we do that? We go have accurate data. We kind of sort our expense categories of what we spend the most on. And we just went down the rabbit hole. It's pretty freaking simple. You say, okay, my number one thing, fuel spend is labor. Okay. What overlaps? What labor can we cut? My number two thing is fuel. What can we cut? Number 3 thing is trucks and vehicles and insurance. There's so many different categories you can look at. But when you do that, you're driving down things to the bottom line. Don't do it too fast. Think about it. Yeah. Be open and honest with your teams. They can kind of give you feedback and it doesn't get too radical. But folks, you got to have data. That's the first thing that you start with. And then the last thing, you have the data. You identified the contracts, the terms, the risk, right? You were transparent with your team and open and honest. You kind of let things off your chest, and or if you're a small business, you're trying to do it yourself. You're just being realistic with yourself. You contacted the vendors to leverage contracts you could. The last thing you have to do is sometimes the toughest thing, and I'll tell you why, you have to implement it. Because that person that you're buying that material from, that you're buying that fuel from, that you're buying those auto parts from, they're coming to your office all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You're developing
every day in my case.
You're developing personable relationships with them that's going to impact them and their families and or their jobs if they're an employee. So I get it. Sometimes it can be very tough to implement it because that person might lose their job, right? You might switch vendors in entirety, right? You might take $1 million out of that family's pocket. Yeah. And it can get personable, but let me tell you, folks, you have to make those decisions. Your business and your employees and your wife and kids are counting on you to make those proper decisions.
Yeah, and I can't stress that enough. And that's some of the hard parts about owning a business, right? If you're thinking about stepping off to do it, is you're going to have to if you're doing it right, you're going to have hard conversations that you may not want to have. And so be prepared. Be prepared for that. Be willing to make those if you're going to make the step to start your own business. Because if you're not, you probably aren't going to make it.
So we'll finish up with this, folks. When you grow your business, there's a lot of things that you can do to drive your bottom line. Like Erik and I figured out that you don't have to buy more equipment, hire more employees. You're trying to make more money, but you're like, I don't want to manage any more things. Well, look at your efficiency model, right? It's simple, right? You don't have to add any more equipment and employees to cut costs and to drive more items to the bottom line. So we'll end it with this. Dive into your numbers. Make sure, like we always say, your data is accurate, okay? You cannot make good, accurate decisions off bad data, and then you go in there and you start diving into it and you implement it and you move forward. That's all we have for you today, folks.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you comment, subscribe, share to your other friends that have businesses. Probably help them.